Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. Let's take you back to our leading story on South Africa's energy crisis, and with the Minister of Electricity confirming that blackouts will remain part of our lives for some time to come. Economists predict that the country's gross domestic product might decrease to 1.2% from 2.3% recorded in 2022. At the same time, the Reserve Bank estimates that load shedding cost the economy about 899 million rand per day. For more on this, we're joined by independent energy analyst Clyde Mallinson in studio. Very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, good to be here.
We've just heard that load shedding is not going to be a thing of the past, as we had previously heard that all of it would come to an end around December 2023. Was this outcome sort of anticipated? Could you have seen it coming from far, far away?
Yeah, it was absolutely as expected. So there's been a lot of people who've said it's not a good idea to predict when load shedding will end, and yet they have been making those predictions. We're in a situation now where it's more a case of looking at, can we reduce the shortfall while we catch up the generation capacity. I think we've got a shortfall between supply and demand that's going to be with us for some time still.
And what do you imagine to be the impact on the South African economy, especially looking at where we are today, already limping economy, and yeah?
Yeah, look, there's differences of opinion here. Eskom have a figure of 10 rand per kilowatt hour that isn't served. So whenever there's a shortage, and that's where the 900 million a day comes from, more or less. Call it $1 billion a day at the moment. Now, what's more important at a macroeconomic level, we're sitting as a country with a GDP that's probably 20% lower than it should be, had we not had load shedding from 2008. It's a cumulative effect. So we're sitting now, I mean, I looked the other day, I think our GDP is about $420 billion now. And not long ago, it was $500 billion. But of course, the rand is weakened.
Yeah.
So when you take the GDP in rand and divide by 18 instead of 14, you get 400 and something billion dollars instead. So we're going backwards on GDP.
So it's wiping off a very significant chunk.
A huge chunk. It's wiped off at least 20% of our GDP collectively. And the problem with GDP is, if we're 20% less than we should be now, each year now, the country has got 20% less economic activity. So the cumulative effect of long-term load shedding on the macroeconomy is horrendous, quite frankly. And to focus on the cost of a unit of load shedding for a day at the moment is disingenuous at a macroeconomic level. Perhaps at a microeconomic level you could accept it, but macroeconomically it's been absolutely devastating.
So with the devastating impact, looking at South African exports, how will we need to adapt now as a country so that we could be part of the global world and trading partners?
Well, there's two things there. First of all, we've gone through, we missed the boom cycle in 2007, 2008. We've missed the boom cycle that we're in at the moment with regard to commodities. The mining companies can't get material to the ports quickly enough to export. So there's that element where we simply aren't able to export as much as we're producing. And I'm talking coal, iron ore, manganese, chrome, bulk materials. Now, not being able to export those simply means that those companies are sitting with stockpiles and they're having to cut back on production. So that's very bad. But what's looming in the future is that many of our trading partners are starting to put in border tax adjustments for carbon. And so we say in Europe, a product that has carbon above a certain threshold is going to have to pay an extra import duty. If your country's carbon emissions are higher than ours, you're gonna have to pay a penalty. Now, South Africa has the opportunity of dropping its carbon lower than most of our export companies if we did the right thing. If we'd been doing the right thing, we actually have a competitive advantage. But at the moment, many of our products are simply not going to be allowed to be sold or are going to be non-competitive. I'm talking about agriculture, wine, export of motor vehicles, all of our products, aluminium. The guys will just say the carbon emissions associated with these products are too high. So you can bring them, but we're going to slap on a 10% border adjustment, and hey, we can buy them from someone else at 10% less than you. So we'll just stop buying from you.
So what could the quick wins be? I mean, you know.
Well, the quick wins could have been put in place 4 or 5 years ago. So let's, that would have been the quick wins. The quick wins now are to utilize our unbelievable natural resources to shift from a coal-heavy economy to a coal-light economy as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And really, it's not a case of switching off coal in order to make space for renewable. It's bringing in renewables as quickly as possible to compensate for the fact that the coal is switching itself off. It's not an either or.
Yeah.
So really, when it comes to looking at the coal fleet, it's down to the artisans in the trenches. Can they keep that thing going to buy us the time to put in the replacement technology that will lower our carbon footprint and allow us to be competitively, to compete in the export markets without being basically put out of the market by border carbon adjustments?
So what measures are going to have to be put in place here? Because, I mean, we're also learning that before we know it, as the months get colder, stage 8 load shedding is inevitable. I mean, 12 hours without power, that impact on SMMEs and other businesses will be detrimental.
We've missed the timeline. Let's just put it that way. You know, when you get to the station late, you've missed the train or missed the bus. You've got to wait for the next one. So this winter's a write-off, I'm afraid, in terms of being able to compensate. The best we can do as South Africans is hot water bottles at the evening peak on winter days. Try and put on a jersey, an extra jersey inside. Don't switch on your heaters. You know, if 14 million households, which are the households connected to the South African grid, switched on a 1 kilowatt heater, that's a little one, not one of these sort of big ones, that would add 14 stages of load shedding to South Africa as those heaters came on. It's 14 million times 1, so it's 14 gigawatts. That just gives you an indication of the fluctuation. So the towns and cities in South Africa can fluctuate from about 10 gigawatts to about 16, which is average. On a cold winter night, they'll go to 24. And if they go to 24 plus the 10, that comes from the energy-intensive user group who just go along using 10 all the time, we'll hit 34. And at the moment, Eskom's battling to generate 24. So do the maths.
So what will that mean? I mean, that number doesn't sound encouraging at all for small business. On a day-to-day, shops are having to close early. And, I mean...
Yeah, I just think it's remarkable that small business is still managing. I don't know if they are managing. I think as a citizenry, we're very close to a collective mental breakdown, basically. You know, it really, I honestly don't know how people are coping that rely on reliable, you know, your hairdressers, your spas, everybody, anyone with a fridge trying to sell cold drinks, whatever. It's just crippling at the moment, and it's so sad and frustrating because it's all unnecessary. We had our first bout of stage 6 load shedding 3.5 years ago. And since that point, we haven't put 1 kilowatt onto the grid as part of an official emergency program. Just think about that. 3.5 years, not 1 kilowatt as a result of that so-called... Remember, I think the president flew back from the African Union when we had the first stage 6 in December 2019. Called a meeting. They had a cabinet lekgotho over the weekend. It's play it again, Sam, right now. That was 3.5 years ago. Not 1 kilowatt, not one heater, not one extra heater can be switched on in winter.
Are we going then to be able to, will we secure that 1.2 trillion rand of investments, which, you know, recently was at the forefront at that investment?
You know, people talk about the cost of switching from our current electricity system to the new one. Let me tell you straight, it actually saves us money. The fight shouldn't be over the cost. The fight's actually who's going to benefit from the savings. Is it going to be a select few people? I would like to see 10 million South Africans own a stake in the new fleet and all benefit. So it actually doesn't cost us money, it saves us money. This notion of the 1.2 trillion or whatever, it's an investment.
Yeah.
That money will give returns that are greater than what you get on a typical pension fund. So it's an investment. It's not an expense. Pouring money into Eskom to write off its legacy debt, now that's an expense. Putting money into new generation is an infrastructure investment that will pay dividends that are greater than the dividends that one gets from, let's say, the Eskom pension fund or the government employees. So it's cost beneficial. And that's before we start talking about the savings on health of the people who, you know, the 3,000 people who die prematurely from bad air quality.
Yeah.
And before we start talking about climate change. So we don't need help from anyone. We just need to get over ourselves, basically.
So, yes, in getting over ourselves, what is it really going to take to resolve this crisis? Is it a matter of focusing on the symptoms of Eskom's load shedding, or should we be looking at the actual causes of the power utilities problems?
No, at this stage, it's really quite simple. It's down to logistics. We need a big map of the country with Imtiaz Suleiman in charge from Gift of the Givers, and he's going to say, we're going to open the ports, we're going to bring ships in from there, we're going to bring transformers in from there, we're going to make sure if the rail's not working, we do. He's not going to say what we're thinking about doing. He's going to tell us what we need to do, and that's what we need to do. We have to have a massive exercise, a logistics exercise of bringing in the kit, and then it doesn't help to say, oh, but you're not allowed to do it if it's not made locally. At the moment, the problem of not having electricity transcends the notion of local manufacture. Once we've sorted that out, we can say, look what we've done. Now we need to do that again and again and again, because the coal fleet is scheduled to retire. So the next round, people can say, gee, did you see South Africa put in 20 gigawatts of renewable and storage in 2 years? And they need to do that. Let's look at setting up shop there. That's when you build the local manufacture on the back of that. It's like vaccines. Imagine if we had not been able to get vaccines in, if we said we'll only get them in when we manufacture them locally. And the fact that an extra 100,000 people might die, well, it's crazy. You don't build a local manufacturing industry on the back of an emergency.
So when it comes to the outlook here, could we be in for another possible ratings downgrade? What's that looking like?
I actually believe that if we could go with a coherent plan to the world and say, this is what we're doing and this is the assistance we need, they'll say, at last, a plan. This is a plan now. How can we help you achieve those goals? Because if you do that, we will start looking at how it's going, and we'll start considering notching up your ratings rather than downgrading them. At the moment, we don't seem to have a plan. Everyone talks about a plan. We're going to fix the old coal fleet. The plan at the moment comes down to logistics. Have we even still got an engineering, procurement, construction industry in the company who can build these new things? Most of them have folded because there's been stalling. And if you're running a big construction industry and nothing gets constructed for 3 or 4 years, well, it's pretty difficult to keep your staff. So if you want to put those construction companies together again, you better put a call out to Australia and Canada and Lisbon, and, bring back those people. So it's down now to, I like to think of it as that big map with I don't know, Ronald Murray or someone from Eskom saying, we can connect here, we can connect there. How do we get the stuff? Literally, that's what it's down. And yet we're just having another meeting and a plan, and we're having squabbling amongst ministers. The more ministers we seem to get, the more scope there is for squabbling.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thanks for weighing in on this discussion.